Marco Rubio thought he had laid the perfect trap. The seasoned Florida senator, with years of experience in Washington and a presidential campaign under his belt, strode into the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room in Washington, D.C., clutching a folder brimming with what he believed was irrefutable evidence. His target? Jasmine Crockett, the bold Democratic representative from Texas, who had been making headlines with her fearless critiques of Republican contradictions. Rubio's plan was straightforward. Corner Crockett with a meticulously crafted question about border security funding, designed to expose what he saw as Democratic inconsistency. His talking points were polished, his expression serious, and his confidence unshaken, bolstered by years of high-stakes debates. But what unfolded next stunned everyone in the room, sending ripples across social media. Jasmine Crockett didn't just deflect Rubio's trap. She obliterated it with a single, searing sentence that left the senator speechless, his face flushed with embarrassment, and the internet ablaze with viral clips. This wasn't merely a political exchange. It was a masterclass in turning an opponent's strength into their downfall. The committee room fell silent as Crockett delivered her devastating blow. Rubio, who moments earlier had exuded confidence, suddenly looked like he wanted to vanish beneath his desk. Other committee members couldn't conceal their shock. Within minutes, Crockett crushes Rubio was trending nationwide. Before we dive into how a first-term representative dismantled a veteran senator with surgical precision, let's set the stage. This is a story of political combat, where preparation meets opportunity, and one woman's brilliance reshapes the narrative. Trust me, you'll want to hear every detail of what happens next. This isn't just a debate. It's a lesson in dismantling an opponent's credibility in real time. And if you think you know how this ends, think again. What Crockett did was so incisive that even Rubio's allies struggled to defend him. Jasmine Crockett embodied the future of the Democratic Party. At 42, the former public defender from Dallas had already carved out a reputation in the Texas legislature before securing her congressional seat. Known for her razor-sharp legal mind and even sharper tongue, Crockett had become one of Congress's most formidable debaters. Her background as a defense attorney honed her ability to think on her feet, spot weaknesses in arguments, and deliver devastating counterattacks. But Crockett was more than a skilled debater. She represented a new wave of black women in politics, unafraid, unapologetic, and unwilling to be silenced by the establishment. Her viral moments, where she dismantled Republican talking points, had already amassed millions of views online, blending legal expertise, political acumen, and a knack for communicating complex ideas in ways that resonated with everyday Americans. Marco Rubio, by contrast, was the embodiment of the Republican establishment's ideal. At 53, the son of Cuban immigrants had spent years selling the American dream, first as Florida Speaker of the House, then as a U.S. Senator, and even as a presidential candidate. Polished and prepared, Rubio had survived countless political battles. His strength lay in his ability to stay on message, delivering Republican talking points with conviction, especially on issues like foreign policy and immigration, where his personal story lent him credibility. Known for arriving at hearings armed with detailed research and carefully crafted questions, Rubio was a seasoned operator, often putting Democrats on the defensive. This Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, held in a packed Washington, D.C. room, focused on border security funding, a topic Rubio believed gave him the upper hand. Republicans had been relentlessly criticizing Democrats on immigration, and Rubio saw this as a chance to score points against one of the party's rising stars. The stakes were high. With elections looming, both sides were hunting for viral moments to energize their bases. Rubio needed to prove his relevance in a Republican Party increasingly dominated by new voices, while Crockett aimed to cement her status as a national figure. The timing made this clash even more significant. Immigration had dominated headlines all week, with both parties vying for the moral high ground. Rubio thought he had found the perfect wedge issue to expose Democratic hypocrisy. Rubio had even coordinated with conservative media to amplify his anticipated soundbite. His communications team stood ready to flood social media with clips the moment he landed his blow. But what Rubio didn't know was that Crockett's team had been studying him. They had analyzed his recent media appearances, spotting patterns in his attacks on Democratic border policies. They had combed through his voting record, statements, and contradictions, preparing not just a defense but a counterattack. While Rubio plotted his assault, Crockett was readying her own. The hearing room buzzed with anticipation. Staffers, reporters, and C-SPAN cameras captured every moment. Rubio had spent the morning refining his strategy with his team, practicing his delivery, and reviewing his research, convinced he had uncovered a contradiction in Crockett's statements that would be impossible to explain away. Crockett, meanwhile, sat calmly at the witness table, reviewing her notes, unfazed by the room's tension. Her years facing hostile prosecutors and judges as a defense attorney had prepared her for moments like this. A grandstanding senator wasn't going to rattle her. The hearing had been underway for about an hour when Rubio seized his moment. Several Democrats had questioned the panel on border security measures, and now it was his turn. Adjusting his tie, he opened his folder and leaned into the microphone with the confidence of a man certain he was about to land a knockout punch. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Rubio began, his voice smooth and authoritative, carrying the tone of a seasoned politician about to make a point. "I'd like to direct my questions to the representative from Texas, Ms. Crockett, because I believe there's been some confusion regarding the Democratic stance on border security." The room's energy shifted. Committee members looked up from their phones and notes, sensing a storm brewing. Crockett sat back, a faint smile tugging at her lips, as if she knew exactly what was coming. Rubio held up a printed document dramatically. "Representative Crockett, I have here a statement from your official social media account, posted just 6 months ago, where you said, and I quote, 'We cannot keep funding failed border policies that criminalize asylum seekers while ignoring the real solutions our communities need.'" He paused, letting the words linger, glancing around the room as if he'd just unveiled a scandal. "Yet, just last week, you voted for a border security package that included funding for the very enforcement mechanisms you criticized. Can you explain to the American people how you reconcile this apparent contradiction?" Republican staffers behind Rubio exchanged smug glances, certain their boss had struck a blow. Reporters in the gallery typed furiously, already framing stories about Democratic flip-flopping. Rubio leaned back, satisfied, waiting for Crockett to fumble her response. But Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her smile widening. "Senator Rubio," she said, her voice calm but carrying a spark, "I appreciate you paying attention to my social media. It's more than I can say for some of your colleagues." A few chuckles broke out on the Democratic side, but Rubio pressed on, undeterred. "This isn't about my colleagues, Representative," he shot back, his tone sharpening. "This is about your credibility. You can't criticize border enforcement for months and then vote to fund those same policies. The people of Texas deserve to know which version of you they elected, the one who opposes border security or the one who supports it when it's convenient." Rubio's follow-up was sharp, designed to box Crockett into a corner. He was using a classic debate tactic. Force your opponent to choose between two bad options. Either Crockett would admit to political opportunism, or she'd have to defend an apparent contradiction. The room grew tense. Republican members nodded approvingly, while Democrats looked concerned about how their star would handle this. Reporters sensed a pivotal moment, though they weren't yet sure how it would unfold. Crockett took a sip of water, unrushed, which only seemed to boost Rubio's confidence. He believed he had her trapped. "I'll give you one more chance to explain, Representative," Rubio said, his voice dripping with condescension. "What I see is a pattern of saying one thing to your base online and doing another when it's time to vote. That's the kind of political game-playing Americans are tired of. So which is it? Are you against border security funding, or are you for it? You can't be both." Rubio leaned back, arms crossed, certain he delivered a masterful cross-examination. The Republican side buzzed with excitement, while some Democrats looked worried. But Rubio had made a critical error. His attack relied on a shallow reading of Crockett's position and the legislation in question. His team had cherry-picked quotes without grasping the policy's nuances. Crockett, however, had been waiting for this exact moment. As a former defense attorney, she knew a weak cross-examination revealed more about the questioner than the witness. And Rubio had just stepped into her trap. The room held its breath, waiting for Crockett's response to what seemed like a devastating attack. Rubio glanced at his notes, confident he'd exposed a fatal flaw in her record. But Crockett wasn't looking at her notes. She was staring directly at Rubio, her expression that of a prosecutor who'd just been handed the perfect opening. Setting down her water glass, she leaned into the microphone, her voice steady but laced with an edge that commanded attention. The room fell silent, staffers pausing their whispers, all eyes on her. "Senator Rubio," she began, her tone calm but razor-sharp, "I'm genuinely curious. Did you actually read the bill you're talking about, or did your staff just pull some quotes for a soundbite?" The question landed like a challenge, cutting through the room's tension. Rubio's confident facade flickered, but he recovered quickly. "Of course I read the legislation, Representative," he said, his voice firm. "It's my job." Crockett nodded slowly, her smile turning dangerous. "Good," she said. "Then you'll have no trouble explaining to everyone here why you voted against the same border security package you're now criticizing me for supporting." The words hit like a thunderclap. Reporters scrambled to check voting records. Republican staffers whispered urgently, and Rubio's face shifted from confidence to confusion. That's not the point," he stammered, clearly unprepared for the counterattack. "The point is your inconsistency." "Oh, but it is absolutely the point," Crockett cut in, her voice smooth and unrelenting. "You're criticizing me for supporting a bill you voted against, while claiming I should have backed border security. So, let's be clear, Senator, are you for border security or against it?" The room's energy flipped. Crockett had turned Rubio's own tactic against him, and she'd done it with devastating precision. Democrats began to smile, realizing their colleague had seized control. Rubio shuffled his papers, visibly flustered. "Representative, you're dodging the question. This is about your flip-flopping, not my voting record." Crockett's eyes gleamed. "Actually, Senator, this is about your understanding of the policies you're discussing," she said, her tone sharpening. "If you'd read the bill, you'd know it included asylum reform, humanitarian aid, and border security measures that don't criminalize people seeking help. The bill you voted against would have delivered the comprehensive solutions you claimed to support. So, either you didn't understand what you were voting on, or you opposed it for political points." The committee room transformed. What began as Rubio's attack had become Crockett's masterclass in dismantling his credibility. Republican members stopped smiling, while Democrats struggled to hide their grins. But Crockett wasn't done. She had prepared for this moment, and she was ready to drive her point home. "Let's talk about flip-flops, Senator, since you brought it up," she continued, her voice now commanding the room. "You've been in the Senate for years, correct? And in that time, you voted against every major immigration reform bill. You've opposed pathways to citizenship. You've blocked funding for immigration courts that could speed up asylum processing. And you've consistently fought humane border policies that would actually address our challenges." Rubio tried to interrupt, but Crockett powered through. "Now you're criticizing me for supporting a bill that funded border security, asylum reform, and humanitarian aid, issues you claim to care about. So, I have to ask, Senator, when you voted against that bill, were you abandoning your commitment to border security, or were you just playing politics?" Rubio's face reddened, his polished demeanor crumbling. He gripped his papers, searching for a response, but Crockett's words had left him exposed. The room was electric, every eye locked on the exchange. Crockett had turned Rubio's attack into a comprehensive indictment of his record. And she wasn't finished yet. The Senate Judiciary Committee room in Washington, D.C. was a pressure cooker, every eye fixed on Jasmine Crockett as she held the floor. Marco Rubio, the seasoned Florida senator, sat across from her, his face flushed, his papers in disarray, his confidence shattered. What had started as his calculated attempt to trap the Texas representative with a question about border security funding had backfired spectacularly. Crockett, with her legal precision and unshakable poise, had flipped the script, exposing Rubio's contradictions with surgical accuracy. Now, she was poised to deliver the knockout blow that would echo far beyond the committee room. Crockett leaned into the microphone, her voice steady but carrying a weight that silenced even the faintest whispers among the staffers. "Senator Rubio," she said, her tone shifting to one of deliberate clarity, as if addressing a student struggling to grasp a lesson. "I'm going to help you out here because it seems you're genuinely confused about the issues we're discussing." The condescension was subtle but unmistakable, and it stung. Rubio's knuckles whitened as he gripped his pen, his face now a deep shade of crimson. The room held its breath, sensing the final strike was imminent. "The bill you're criticizing me for supporting, the one you voted against, allocated $14 billion for border security," Crockett continued, her words measured, each one landing like a hammer. "That included funding for technology upgrades, more Border Patrol agents, and improved processing facilities. It also provided resources for immigration courts to cut asylum case backlogs from 4 years to 6 months. It created legal pathways for asylum seekers, so they wouldn't have to risk dangerous crossings. And yes, it included humanitarian aid for communities dealing with migrant influxes." She paused, locking eyes with Rubio, her gaze unrelenting. "In other words, Senator, it addressed every single issue you claimed to champion on border security. Yet you voted against it." The silence in the room was deafening. Rubio looked like a man caught in a spotlight, his earlier bravado replaced by a stunned expression. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Crockett, sensing the moment, pressed her advantage. "So, I'm curious," she said, her voice now laced with a quiet intensity that drew everyone in. "Can you explain to the American people why you opposed legislation that would have solved the very problems you're complaining about today?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unanswerable. Reporters in the gallery typed furiously, their fingers racing to capture the moment. Democratic committee members exchanged glances, barely containing their admiration, while Republicans stared at their notes or the floor, unwilling to meet Rubio's eyes. Rubio fumbled with his papers, his voice faltering as he tried to regain footing. Those are different situations," he managed, but the words lacked conviction, sounding hollow against Crockett's razor-sharp delivery. "The bills I voted against had issues that didn't align with effective policy." Crockett didn't let him finish. "Issues," she interjected, her tone now carrying a hint of incredulity. "Issues like providing humanitarian aid? Issues like treating asylum seekers with dignity? Issues like funding immigration courts to process cases efficiently, instead of letting backlogs pile up, the same backlogs you love to complain about on cable news?" The room erupted in a low murmur, the weight of her words sinking in. Rubio's face grew redder, his composure unraveling further with each passing second. Crockett leaned back slightly, her point made, but her focus unwavering. "Actually, Senator, let me save you the trouble of answering," she said, that dangerous smile returning, the one that signaled she was about to land the final blow. The room leaned forward, every person, staffer, senator, reporter, hanging on her next words. She paused, letting the tension build, her eyes never leaving Rubio's. Then, with a voice that cut through the silence like a blade, she delivered the line that would define the moment. "You voted against it because solving problems doesn't get you airtime on conservative talk shows, but grandstanding about problems you refuse to fix apparently does." The committee room exploded. Democratic members couldn't suppress their laughter, while Republicans sat in stunned silence. Their earlier confidence evaporated. Rubio's mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. He looked like a man who just realized he'd stepped into a trap he couldn't escape. Reporters were already uploading clips to social media, knowing they'd just witnessed a viral moment. Crockett crushes Rubio surged on platforms across the internet, with thousands sharing the exchange within minutes. Crockett, however, remained composed, her expression calm but triumphant, as if she'd just finished a routine day in court. "So don't you dare question my consistency," she continued, her voice rising with controlled indignation, "when you've spent years voting against every solution while pointing fingers at everyone else. That's not leadership, Senator. That's political theater, and frankly, you're not even good at it." The room was a mix of gasps and stifled laughter. Rubio sat frozen, his face now resembling a ripe tomato, his carefully crafted attack reduced to ashes. The committee chairman banged the gavel, trying to restore order, but the damage was done. In less than 5 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, but had dismantled Rubio's credibility on the very issue he thought was his strength. The fallout was immediate. As the hearing continued, clips of Crockett's takedown spread like wildfire across social media. The C-SPAN footage of her devastating line, "You voted against it because solving problems doesn't get you airtime on conservative talk shows, but grandstanding about problems you refuse to fix apparently does," racked up 50,000 shares within an hour. On video platforms, the clip exploded to 2 million views before the hearing even adjourned. The internet was flooded with reactions, memes, and commentary from political observers stunned by what they'd witnessed. Even conservative voices grudgingly acknowledged the hit. One prominent pundit posted, "Say what you want about Crockett, but that was a surgical strike. Rubio didn't see it coming." Another meme showed Rubio's shocked face with the caption, "When you think you're setting a trap, but you're the one who gets caught." Liberal audiences were ecstatic. Progressive leaders shared the clip with captions like, "This is how you fight back," and "Jasmine Crockett just showed everyone how it's done." The hashtag Crockett for President began trending as supporters celebrated their new hero. But the praise wasn't limited to one side of the aisle. Political analysts across the spectrum lauded Crockett's tactical brilliance. A former Republican strategist posted a detailed breakdown. She flipped his question, exposed his voting record, showed deeper policy knowledge, and landed a soundbite that'll be quoted for years. That's how you win a debate. Rubio's team scrambled into damage control mode. Within hours, they issued a statement attempting to clarify his stance on border security, but it only confirmed Crockett's accusations, highlighting his votes against comprehensive reform. Rubio himself took to social media, posting, "Representative Crockett may be good at sound bites, but Americans want results, not rhetoric." The response was swiftly drowned out by replies pointing out the irony. "She just called you out for prioritizing rhetoric over results, Senator. Try again." His team booked him on a friendly conservative talk show that evening, but even the host seemed hesitant to fully defend him. "Marco, you've got to admit, she landed a solid hit," the host said, chuckling uncomfortably. "Maybe next time, bring more ammo." Meanwhile, Crockett's star was rising. Democratic leaders recognized they had a new powerhouse and immediately scheduled her for more media appearances. Senate leadership shared a clip of the exchange, with one senior figure captioning it, "This is what preparation looks like." Cable news networks played the clip on a loop, with analysts dissecting every moment. One commentator noted, "Crockett didn't just win a debate. She exposed the gap between politicians who study policy and those who rely on talking points." Even conservative outlets struggled to spin the story in Rubio's favor, with one host admitting she outmaneuvered him, plain and simple. Within 24 hours, Crockett's campaign reported a fundraising surge, pulling in over $500,000 from small donors across the country. Many cited the Rubio exchange in their donation notes, with one supporter writing, "I've never given to an out-of-state candidate before, but after watching you take down Rubio, I'm all in." The money was a sign of something bigger. Crockett had created a moment that resonated beyond partisan lines, earning respect for her sheer skill and preparation. But the impact went deeper than social media buzz and campaign dollars. The exchange was a turning point, highlighting a shift in American politics. Crockett's performance showed how a new generation of leaders, diverse, media-savvy, and unafraid, was challenging the old guard. Her ability to blend legal expertise with a commanding presence made her a formidable force, one that even seasoned politicians like Rubio couldn't underestimate. Political analysts were already framing the moment as a case study in modern political combat. This is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, one professor wrote. Crockett didn't just win. She redefined how these battles are fought. For Rubio, the moment was a brutal wake-up call. Once a rising star with presidential ambitions, he now faced questions about his relevance. The humiliating defeat to a first-term representative raised doubts about his preparation and strategy. Why had his team failed to anticipate Crockett's counterattack? How had they missed the contradictions in his own record? Republican strategists began whispering about the need for better preparation against opponents like Crockett, who came armed with facts and fearlessness. You can't just rely on seniority anymore, one operative said. These new Democrats are playing to win. As the day drew to a close, the hearing room emptied, but the echoes of Crockett's words lingered. She had walked in as a rising star and walked out as a national figure, her name now synonymous with political brilliance. Rubio, meanwhile, left the room quietly, his folder of notes tucked under his arm, his confidence shaken. The clash had been more than a debate. It was a glimpse into the future of American politics, where preparation, authenticity, and courage could upend even the most established players. The Senate Judiciary Committee room in Washington, D.C. had long since cleared out, but the reverberations of Jasmine Crockett's evisceration of Marco Rubio were still rippling through the political landscape. In a mere 5 minutes, the Texas representative had turned a calculated attack from a seasoned senator into a viral moment that redefined her career and exposed Rubio's vulnerabilities. The clip of her devastating one-liner, "You voted against it because solving problems doesn't get you airtime on conservative talk shows, but grandstanding about problems you refuse to fix apparently does," was inescapable. It looped endlessly on cable news, racked up millions of views online, and became the centerpiece of countless memes. Crockett crushes Rubio wasn't just a hashtag. It was a cultural phenomenon, a testament to a new era in American politics where preparation and authenticity could topple even the most entrenched figures. As the dust settled, the broader implications of the exchange began to take shape. Crockett's performance wasn't just a win for her. It was a signal of a seismic shift in the political arena. The old guard, represented by Rubio's polished but ultimately hollow talking points, was being challenged by a new generation of leaders who combined deep policy knowledge with media-savvy instincts. For Crockett, the moment was transformative, catapulting her from a promising first-term representative to a national figure. For Rubio, it was a humiliating setback, one that raised serious questions about his political future. The clash in that committee room had become more than a viral moment. It was a case study in how to win in the modern political battlefield. The immediate aftermath was chaotic for Rubio's team. As the viral clip spread, his communication staff scrambled to contain the damage. Their hastily released statement, meant to clarify Rubio's stance on border security, only deepened the wound, inadvertently confirming Crockett's accusations about his voting record. Social media was merciless. When Rubio posted a defensive message claiming, "Americans want results, not sound bites," the top reply cut deep. "Senator, Crockett just proved you're the one chasing sound bites while voting against results." The post was buried under a flood of similar responses, each one amplifying Crockett's takedown. His appearance on a conservative talk show later that evening did little to help. The host, usually a reliable ally, couldn't resist a jab. "Marco, you walked into that one. She was ready for you." Rubio's forced smile and weak attempts to pivot only underscored how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. Republican strategists were rattled. Behind closed doors, party operatives expressed frustration with Rubio's performance. "You can't go up against someone like Crockett with half-baked research," one GOP consultant complained. "She didn't just beat him, she made him look irrelevant." The incident sparked broader concerns within the party about their ability to compete against a new breed of Democratic talent. "The rules have changed," another strategist admitted. These younger Democrats come prepared for war, and we're still relying on reputation and talking points. That won't cut it anymore. Some even began questioning Rubio's viability as a standard-bearer for Republican priorities like border security, especially after he'd been so thoroughly exposed on the issue he claimed as his strength. Meanwhile, Crockett's star was soaring. Her campaign's fundraising haul surpassed $700,000 within 48 hours, with donations pouring in from every corner of the country. Supporters left notes like, "I saw you take down Rubio," and "I'm in for life," or "We need more fighters like you in Washington." The surge wasn't just about money. It was a sign that Crockett had tapped into something deeper, a hunger for politicians who could cut through the noise with clarity and courage. Democratic leadership wasted no time capitalizing on her momentum, booking her for high-profile media appearances and positioning her as a key voice in the party's messaging on immigration and beyond. One senior Democratic senator shared the clip with a caption, "This is how you fight for what's right." Cable news networks couldn't get enough. Analysts dissected Crockett's performance like a masterclass in political strategy. One commentator on a major network noted, "What Crockett did wasn't just a good comeback. It was a surgical dismantling of Rubio's entire approach. She showed she understands policy better than he does, and she made it entertaining." Another program devoted an entire segment to her background as a defense attorney, explaining how her courtroom experience had prepared her to spot weaknesses and deliver devastating counterattacks. Even conservative-leaning outlets struggled to dismiss her. One host grudgingly admitted, "She's a force. Rubio picked the wrong fight." The viral moment also sparked a cultural conversation. Social media platforms buzzed with memes that captured Rubio's stunned expression. One showed him with the caption, "When you think you're the hunter but end up the prey." Another featured Crockett with a confident smirk, labeled, "Just another day schooling senators." Progressive activists hailed her as a hero, with some pushing Crockett for Senate as a call for her to aim higher. Political junkies across the spectrum praised her tactical brilliance, with one viral thread breaking down her strategy. She baited him, flipped his question, exposed his hypocrisy, and landed a soundbite that'll define his career. That's next-level political combat. Beyond the immediate fallout, the Crockett-Rubio exchange became a turning point in how political observers understood the evolving dynamics of American politics. It highlighted the rise of a new generation of leaders, diverse, unafraid, and armed with the tools to thrive in a media-driven age. Crockett, a black woman from Texas, had outmaneuvered a white male senator with presidential ambitions, using superior preparation and a commanding presence to expose his weaknesses. Political scientists began citing the moment as a case study in modern political communication. Crockett didn't just win an argument, one professor wrote. She crafted a moment that was instantly shareable, memorable, and devastating. That's the new standard for political success. Communication schools started using the clip to teach students about preparation, strategic thinking, and the power of policy knowledge. One instructor noted, "Crockett showed that in today's politics, you can't just rely on charisma or experience. You need to know the details, anticipate your opponent's moves, and deliver a message that resonates beyond the room." The exchange also underscored the generational and demographic shifts reshaping Washington. The old model, where veteran politicians could coast on seniority and intimidate newcomers, was crumbling. Crockett represented a new archetype, a leader who combined legal expertise, political instincts, and a knack for connecting with audiences in real time. For Crockett, the moment was a launch pad. Her social media following skyrocketed, gaining 300,000 followers in just 2 days. Speaking requests flooded in from universities, advocacy groups, and media outlets eager to hear from the woman who'd humbled a political heavyweight. Democratic strategists began whispering about her potential for higher office, with some suggesting she could be a Senate contender or even a future presidential candidate. "She has the instincts you can't teach," one veteran campaign manager said. This wasn't just a win, it was the kind of moment that builds a career. Yet Crockett remained grounded. In an interview the day after the hearing, She brushed off the hype while keeping her focus on the issues. "I'm flattered by the support," she said with a smile. "But this isn't about viral moments. It's about solving real problems: border security, immigration reform, humanitarian aid. We can't do that if politicians are more interested in cable news hits than doing the work." Her words only endeared her further to supporters, who saw her as a rare blend of authenticity and brilliance. For Rubio, the consequences were far less rosy. The exchange wasn't just an embarrassing moment. It was the kind of public humiliation that could haunt a politician for years. Political observers noted that it raised fundamental questions about his competence, especially on an issue he'd long claimed as his expertise. When you get outmaneuvered that badly on your own turf, it's hard to recover, one Republican strategist remarked. This clip will be in every attack ad against him for the rest of his career. Potential Democratic challengers to Rubio's Senate seat were already seizing the opportunity, with one tweeting, "If Rubio can't hold his own against Jasmine Crockett in a hearing, how can he represent Florida in the Senate?" The incident also exposed weaknesses in Rubio's preparation. How had his team failed to anticipate Crockett's counterattack? Why hadn't they vetted his own voting record for vulnerabilities? Republican donors began to question whether Rubio was the right messenger for their priorities, particularly on immigration. Once seen as a rising star with presidential potential, Rubio now faced a narrative of decline, struggling to find his place in a party transformed by new dynamics. "He's a politician whose time may have passed," one analyst wrote. This wasn't just a loss. It was a signal that the old playbook doesn't work anymore. The broader Republican Party took notice. The Crockett-Rubio clash served as a wake-up call, highlighting the need to adapt to a new political reality. "You can't underestimate opponents like Crockett," one GOP operative said. "She's not just playing to win the room. She's playing to win the internet, and she's better at it than most of our guys." Party leaders began urging their colleagues to invest in better research, sharper messaging, and a deeper understanding of policy to avoid similar humiliations. As the weeks unfolded, the Crockett-Rubio exchange solidified its place as a defining moment in American politics. It wasn't just about one representative outshining a senator. It was about the changing rules of the game. In an era where every moment is recorded and every exchange can go viral, politicians need to be ready for combat at all times. Reputation and experience alone are no longer enough. Those who thrive, like Crockett, bring a lethal combination of preparation, policy mastery, and media savvy. Those who don't, like Rubio in this moment, risk becoming cautionary tales. For Jasmine Crockett, the path forward was clear. She had established herself as a force to be reckoned with, a politician who could hold her own against any opponent and inspire a new generation of voters. Her performance in that committee room wasn't just a victory. It was a blueprint for how to succeed in the modern political arena. Speaking requests continued to pour in, and her campaign reported record-breaking fundraising numbers, with donors citing her as the kind of leader Washington needed. She remained focused on her work, pushing for comprehensive immigration reform and advocating for policies that balance security with humanity. But her name was now synonymous with something bigger: the rise of a new political generation. For Marco Rubio, the road ahead was uncertain. The exchange had exposed vulnerabilities that his opponents were quick to exploit. His team worked to rebuild his image, scheduling appearances to emphasize his experience and commitment to conservative values, but the shadow of Crockett's takedown lingered. Some allies urged him to treat the moment as a wake-up call, a chance to sharpen his approach and reconnect with voters. Others whispered that his time in the spotlight was fading, that the party needed fresh faces to carry its message. Only time would tell whether Rubio could recover or if this moment marked the beginning of his political decline. What was undeniable, though, was the lasting impact of that day in the Senate Judiciary Committee room. Jasmine Crockett had not only won a debate, but had reshaped the conversation about what it means to be a leader in American politics. Her combination of legal precision, political instincts, and fearless delivery had set a new standard, one that would inspire allies and intimidate opponents for years to come. The clip of her dismantling Rubio would be replayed, analyzed, and celebrated as a masterclass in political combat. A reminder that in the new era of politics, those who come prepared, speak truth, and fight with courage will always have the upper hand.